Hi, and welcome to Danny After Dark. If you're new here, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a notification or a new episode. Tonight will be a second edition of the favorite true crime podcast that I am into right now, and you should check out. So let's go ahead and find out more. Let's go ahead and dive on in. The first true crime podcast that I recommend, and to be honest, I'm obsessed with right now, is called Red Handed. It is hosted by Hannah and Sariti. They have almost 300 episodes. I don't know how I missed this podcast for so long. It was recently recommended to me by one of the viewers of the Manson Saga discussion panel that I'm a co-host on over on the podcast. And a viewer had said they had done an episode on Roman Polanski and that I should check it out. So I did. And I was hooked when I heard their episode. So needless to say, I am trying like crazy to catch up because again, they have almost 300 episodes. Hannah and Sariti, their dynamic together is amazing. You can tell they work really well. The flow of the show is awesome. The content that they put out is really, really great. The episodes that I'm really vibing with right now is when they cover the satanic panic movement in the United States as well as in Europe and some of the things that are still happening because of that. That some people are still in jail because of accusations from decades ago. And that blows my mind. But anyway, that's just one little avenue that they've gone on for this podcast. So I cannot recommend this podcast enough. It is great. Right now, it is my hands down favorite podcast to listen to. So definitely check it out. Again, it's called Red Handed. The second true crime podcast that I would recommend is called Stop the Killing. And this one is by Catherine Schweit and Sarah Ferris. Catherine is a former FBI agent and actually put out a book called Stop the Killing. That book is in my Amazon wish list for Christmas. So if I don't get that, needless to say, I will be buying it instantly on December 26th. But this podcast handles school shootings, mass shootings, as well as public shootings. And it is done so extremely tastefully. I know this topic is a bit of a trigger for a lot of people. Don't let that stop you from checking out this podcast. It is filled with great information. And Catherine gives a lot of information from when she was in the FBI. For example, the run, hide, fight motto. Not every school teaches that, and they really, really should to these kids. As well as see something, say something. Sounds easy, right? But not everybody does it. A lot of these times with these cases, it's easy to look back and neighbors or the community or other students will say, oh, well, we noticed this, but that doesn't really do a lot of good after the fact. So they handle the subject really, really well and give great information on tips they would give for you as an average person or for your family, especially if you have a child, what to kind of look for and what to do in school. So again, don't sit on this podcast. Check it out. One thing that they do a phenomenal job on, you will never once in any of their episodes hear them say the shooter's name, not once. And I really respect that because if you think about it, with all of these shootings, we know the shooter's name, but can we name a single victim? Not always, or not at all. And that's really unfortunate. They've already gotten enough publicity and they don't need any more. So they're just giving the facts about the cases. And I really, really respect that. So definitely check that out. It's called Stop the Killing. The third true crime podcast that I would really recommend right now is called the Serial Killer Podcast and is by Thomas Rosalind Wyborg Thune. And he is a Norwegian podcaster. This podcast has been out for several years. I'd originally listened to it several years ago and I was hooked on it. And then I think with all these other true crime podcasts that I was finding, I just kind of put it on the back burner. But I recently picked it back up and I'm kicking myself wondering why I just kind of put it on the back burner to begin with because it's so good. He does really, really great information. And the podcast links, they're not super long. So some of them that are released on other podcasts are an hour, sometimes an hour and a half. His are usually 25, 30 minutes, sometimes 35 at most. So it's really good. I can get it in on a quick drive somewhere, or if I'm going for a quick walk, and I can listen to the whole episode at once, which is really great. Some episodes he does break into multi-parts. If there are more kind of prolific offenders, for example, Ed Kemper, something like that would be broken up into multi-part episodes. But it's great because, again, they'll be in smaller, shorter time frames, so you can listen to them a lot easier when they come out every single week. But definitely check that out. Again, the Serial Killer Podcast. The fourth true crime podcast that I would recommend is called True Murders, The Most Shocking Killers. And that podcast is hosted by Dan Zupansky. This podcast is really great if you are into books or looking for book recommendations, because what Dan does is he interviews true crime authors, a variety of them. It does not have to only be on killers within the true crime subject. So he'll have authors on every single episode, as well as some of the authors, you'll hear them come back if you listen to enough of the podcast, because as we know, true crime never stops. And a lot of these authors will put out multiple books. So he'll have them back on, which is great, because if they're an author you already like and he has them back on and they're putting out another book, chances are you'll probably get another book again, which is what I know I do. So this podcast has been great for me because I love to read. So there'll be episodes that come out with authors on subjects that I'd never heard of or I had heard of, but this will give a different perspective on the case. I'm like, you know what? I really dug this hour interview. Now I want to get this book. So I've gotten a lot of books from listening to this podcast. And in my previous true crime book recommendations video that I'd done a few months ago, I'd talked about author Harold Schechter. He has been on this podcast several times because he put out so many true crime books. And I've gotten every single one of Harold's books. And some of them I didn't know were out until I heard it on this podcast. So definitely check this out, especially if you're into reading true crime. Again, that is called True Murder, The Most Shocking Killers. The fifth and final true crime podcast that I am recommending for today's video is called Monsters Who Kill, Serial Killer Confessions. And this podcast is hosted by Amanda Howard and Robert McKnight. Together, they do a really great job of breaking down true crime cases. And what I really like about this podcast is they will play a lot of clips from these cases. They'll play a clip and then they'll discuss it and analyze it, talk about the case more, play another clip, discuss it and analyze it. But they do it in a really, really great way. So you get a lot out of it. And sometimes they view things differently, the two co-hosts, and they'll talk about that. So it's really great because you get to not only hear a narrated version of the case that you're looking to want to learn more about, but you'll get to hear actual clips from the case, whether it is from court, whether it's from the police interviews, you'll get to hear actual audio. And they do that in every single one of their episodes. So it is an awesome, awesome podcast. And again, they work really well together. They vibe really well off each other, Amanda and Robert. So it flows really, really well. So definitely check out that podcast. Again, it is called Monsters Who Murder, Serial Killer Confessions. So that is, again, the top 5 true crime podcasts that I am really into right now. I hope you guys check them all out. They are really great. You will not be disappointed. Do you have any true crime podcasts that you are listening to that you can't get enough of or want to suggest to me? Leave it in the comments below. Let's be interactive. There's so many great podcasts out there right now. I'm just trying to share the ones that I'm into, and I'd love to hear the ones you're into as well. Do you have any suggestions for any true crime cases that you'd like me to cover? Well, leave it down below. You may see it featured in an upcoming episode. Until next time, remember, we don't live in darkness. Darkness lives in us.